Hello and welcome, everyone. We're really glad to have you here today for the final session in this iteration of the series, Day One and Beyond. You're in the cloud. Now what? This series has been taking you through a series of topics and activities related to building out on Oracle Cloud. And for anyone who might be new to one of these events, welcome. We've got all of the rest on demand on replay, so you can go back and check them out whenever you want. And we are hosted for the series on Cloud Customer Connect. So if you are not already a member of that forum for our Oracle community, we invite you to join. I'll be sharing some resources for you so you can go back and check out that community, create a free account. You can post questions, join in discussions about all kinds of topics, and of course, look for more upcoming events like this one. My name is Kenna Kettrick. I am a program manager with the OCI go-to-market team. And today I'm joined by the original team here of Jeremy Walker, Master Principal Cloud Architect, and Larry Beausoleil, Cloud Engineering Senior Enablement Manager, to close out this series, walk us through what we've learned so far, and touch on some next steps once you've started to build out on the cloud. What do you do after that? All right. And I think that is enough from me. So Larry, Jeremy, take it away. It's all yours.
Awesome. Thanks, Kenna. Welcome, everybody, to Day One and Beyond. So today's topic, you're in the cloud, now what? So this is something that we've kind of been progressing towards. And I am Larry Beausoleil, one of your hosts. I'm joined here with Jeremy Walker, and we also brought Brandon and Larry with us from the quick start portion of the series. So welcome, Jeremy. Welcome, Brandon. How's it going today?
Thanks, Larry. It's going pretty good here.
Yeah, I'm doing good over here as well. Thanks, Larry.
Awesome. So today's topic, it's something that we don't really have a slide deck for you. I don't want to do death by PowerPoint in this. We're going to kind of go through some of the stuff we've talked about. Kind of the next steps, where you're going to go with this, and this is something that is I think a necessary next step when we talk about Day One and Beyond, because there is that beyond portion. What do you do after your account set up? What do you do after your components are in place? What do you do after you're following every single best practice that you should be following and the architectural design principles that you should be implementing when you're building out on Oracle Cloud? So let's take a look at some of these links. I'm bringing up some of the stuff that we've talked about in our previous portions, and some one new link here, but we're going to start with the cloud adoption framework. And this is, for Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. And if you joined us a couple weeks back, we talked about this. So Jeremy, you want to give us a high level overview of what this is and how it will be? Or how it'll...
Definitely. And like I said, we went over this. Strongly recommend, as you're growing in the cloud, as you're taking that first step, you've made your decision, you've identified workloads, you look at this cloud adoption framework, and there's this link, and then there's some more documentation that's linked as well that goes a bit deeper and step by step in evaluating the idea of what framework, what things need to be in place, and what steps to take as you're growing in the cloud, and essentially those first baby steps. And like I said, I'd strongly suggest that if this is something that you're in the process doing, go back, take a look at that. I think episode 2, I think, Larry, that we went through this. But it's really crucial to kind of save time on the back end, to make it more comfortable, to invest this time on the front end, to go through the practices and the procedure of evaluating the state of not only just your applications, but also of your people, of your business strategies, of your culture, things that often aren't the first thing that's at the top of the list when you start making a technical move or a migration or anything of that nature. It's something that, as you move into this new methodology for operating your business, putting it on a cloud platform, you have a whole new set of tools, a whole new set of decisions, a whole new set of opportunity in front of you that you did not have previous. Timelines are shortened. Your application agility and development agility has been heightened and increased. and also the skill set of the people that you employ has now extended. Now that can go into training, which we go into in this CAF. That can go into hiring policies and strategies. All of that needs to be addressed before you really take that first step technically in the cloud. A lot of this, and I look forward. Brandon and Uma, who also I just saw join us, are going through that now with the quick start series of this day one and beyond, and they touch on a lot of those things. They touch on the technical aspects, those technical choices, and then the underpinning of all of those is this framework, and it's something that you really need to be familiar with as an organization as you're taking these first steps.
Yeah, let's kind of get into some of those pieces. So Brandon and Uma, thanks for joining us. Let's talk about what are the topics that you covered for your quick start and how that kind of progresses into the next portion. So just go through just a brief highlight of those 6 topics real quick.
Yeah, we covered our networking quick start, which goes through many of the basic, networking components within OCI, such as virtual cloud networks, subnets, some of the different gateways, and so on. We looked at the different database options that we have within Oracle Cloud. We looked at some of the different security services that we have available to us, and just general concepts such as regions, availability domains, and kind of what that looks like when you move to the cloud.
Yeah. And just kind of to add on to that too, I feel like that is kind of the most impactful. And especially when you're looking at this adoption framework and you want to plan your cloud strategy first, right? Like it's so often that we see a lot of customers like jump in and kind of just start using all these different resources and tools without, proper tagging set up in place, or thinking about like how they're going to organize their costs and kind of evaluate the cost analysis. So I feel like all those aspects are really important, especially to understand before and like see it in use, see how it can practically be used in your tenancy. Because it's just going to help you kind of stay on top of everything as you go down and actually start migrating to cloud and using your applications like that. So I would say, the concepts in the beginning when Brandon and I touched on the technical aspects. So just like learning about the different regions, how high availability works in OCI, as well as kind of, our business operations as well. I think those are really important parts of the whole framework in terms of planning and stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something that the precursors to some of the stuff Jeremy and I were talking about, cloud adoption framework, best practices, getting into building some of those components, you have to have those in place. And since this is really a talk about where we were in this series and getting into the now what, you're in the cloud, you've built out, what are the things you have to consider? And these are still crucial topics as you progress. You're still looking at cloud adoption framework, because it's still the question of what is our next steps. So I think that the biggest transition that I see when we look at your being in the cloud is, can you move quicker? The whole goal is to move your application and adjust it, make iterations, and increase, I guess, the scalability of it while becoming, cost optimized, while becoming, making sure that you have your performance in place, making sure all of these things are in place. And that's the biggest benefits of the cloud. And
you touched on something really important there, is that there are so many checks on the list that you go through, Larry, that sometimes you'll feel like, wow, this is a lot of effort. That's the backbone of that, where you can, I guess the barometer that you can check yourself against as far as your progress is this cloud adoption framework, and know that we're there with you along the way. It is a journey. It's not a quarterly, sign a contract and you get a product installed. It is a new methodology for operating your technical stack. And you mentioned iteration. It's you get to a point where you're stable and you iterate again and you optimize cost, you optimize security, you optimize operations. And it's something where you're continually moving towards that utopia, a band that nobody's heard of, that Training for Utopia reference, where you're going towards that perfection that you're yearning for. And so that this framework here, that again, we went over it, a lot of it's touched by Uma and Brandon in their series on how to implement it. And it's something that should be in your bookmark list as a for quick reference when you're doing your day-to-day and your designs.
Yep. Yeah. So I want to kind of pause on what we're talking about. There is a question of, for the cloud adoption framework and everything, Microsoft, AWS, some of the other companies out there have design wizards. We have OKit. So let me pull this up. This is an older link, but this is something that can kind of help. It's very similar. Now, when you're looking for like the core recommendations of what do I need to do, and what am I building out, that's something that would fall under a different category. But this is something that you can use a design wizard to build out to what you're trying to do, and then it creates a Terraform template. So this is kind of the next steps piece, because I know everybody out there is probably like, well, I built out we built out in the cloud. We're already there. How do we pull this in, maybe automate it, get to the next steps? And this is part of it. This can actually look at your current compartments and you can build Terraform from it, so you can automate some of that process. From the design wizard, we don't have a direct drop in place copy of what some of the other items are out there. We have the CAF, we have we have a advisor tool that will tell you, hey, these are the recommendations based on our best practices. This is something that down the road, I guarantee we'll have a more intuitive package that will help with what you're looking for. Right now we have OKit, we have our cloud advisor tool that's inside the console, and then we have our architecture center that kind of gives you like, this is our recommendation, and these are solutions that have been validated or vetted to be able to be deployed.
Yeah, and something that we've mentioned, something that you touched on there, is this does provide that Terraform output for this design that leads directly into not just best practices, but the CAF, and also the underpinnings of your tenancy within OCI. You mentioned an established cloud presence elsewhere. Following best practices, you should be using, I won't say you most likely, you should be using an infrastructure as code orchestration method for building out your cloud presence. That we have resources and tools that are native to OCI that ingest those and can build out using existing code bases, with some changes obviously for the different the vendors, but the resources themselves can flow directly into OCI from that initial design that you've built elsewhere. So it's not, you don't have to start from scratch. You can lens into the repeatability that's in that CAF. It lends into the auditability and security as well. So starting from this, it was a good question to call out, because this is a great place to start as you're building out your presence in the cloud, specifically OCI.
Definitely. And this kind of, this goes back to some of the best practices that we talked about. Here's some of the questions that should be asked or should be looked at when you start building out. You're creating a plan. You're creating your diagram. You're making sure you have the correct teams in place, and that's part of the initial steps of getting into the cloud. Now that you're in the cloud and you have those teams in place, where do we go from there? It is making sure that we have better controls in place, better compliance, better, performance and cost optimization, going through these best practices. they should be implemented at the start. Like we're kind of reiterating here, Brandon and Uma are talking about it in the quick start, the portion of this series that we brought up, where we're talking about how to deploy your network, how to deploy using operational tools, tagging, all of that. But now that we're actually inside of the cloud, what do we want to look at? And that's where we get into like Cloud Advisor. We get into some of the other tools to say, are we continually doing this correctly? Because Jeremy, I don't know about you, I've gotten down a year in an architecture that I've deployed and been like, well, I have the diagram, but I know some stuff has changed. Documentation has been updated, but what's the next steps? How do we iterate on that? How do we make this more efficient? And I think the piece that we haven't highlighted on is the learning piece and keeping up to date with Oracle's releases or new features. Because a lot of times you're looking at it, and I deployed an instance and now things have changed. And I've been in trainings where things have changed in the console for the better. They've moved around, or they've made, I was looking in the console a couple of days ago, and encryption was already enabled by default, but now encryption in transit is checked by default. So it's something you have to consciously go in and say, if I don't need that security piece, I have to go turn off the security piece, basically. But it's those types of things that start changing, and you have to make sure that you're ready for it as the process continues.
Yeah, it's a continual evolution, and I think we mentioned this before. And again, the idea of this is the review. Something we hit on was treating your infrastructure as if it is a software stack. So the same thing. You run updates, you run audits, tests, and Q&A, all on these things. You also keep your infrastructure up to date with the latest security patches and best practices. That lends itself to infrastructure as code, which I just mentioned, but also just what Larry was saying, being able to identify the current state of your infrastructure, the current state of your overall architecture is crucial for this. Do we have encryption? Do we need encryption in transit? What is our current shapes and utilization targets, and what are they in actuality? All of those things are managed, are not something you have to worry about when you have a standard or a kind of a legacy on-prem standard for acquisition, install, and lease. You got a 3-year lease. You don't have to worry about sizing or anything for the next 3 to 5 years. With the cloud, it's something you can continually grow, improve, and right size and right scale to your needs. And so that's something that's done through continual integration, and these something that's mentioned here through you're having the right people in the right places with the right skill sets.
Definitely. Jeremy, I'm not sure if you know the answer to this one. I know for OKit, it doesn't generate a bill of materials, but from a cost comparison, I know we have a cost analysis tool. I'm just trying to remember the name of it. I don't know if you know.
We actually just released, in the last month or so, a new cloud cost estimator. I can put that in chat so that everybody can see it. And it's let's see here. Yeah, and it doesn't produce that bill of materials like you're wondering, but there is some bill of materials for some of the quick starts and some of the architectures that we have that you can feed into this cost estimator. So it's there's some, like I said, in this tool, there's reference architectures that you can select to see what the cost would be. So it's something, it doesn't directly feed, to go to the question, it doesn't directly feed from that builder, but it's something where you can easily see what a cost would be close to what your installation or what your application would be.
Yep. So it's a good start, and it's something that if you see something, give us feedback. Let us know if there's things that you're looking for, because this is something that I can send it over to the PMs and say, hey, and this is one of the things I've been working with, like Cloud Advisor. I've been working with some of the other tools to say, hey, this is what customers are seeing. This is what we need to work on. So it's really we want to hear what you're trying to do so that we know how to drive some of the product change too. So the other piece here, so we've talked about cloud adoption framework, we talked about best practices, and there's a lot of components to best practices. And I know, Jeremy, you and I went through this pretty in depth a couple sessions ago of the different pieces, talking about monitoring, auditing your environment, reliability, performance costs, like all of these things continue to grow and develop as you get more entrenched in using the cloud. Making sure that you have the personas kind of built out. What's the translation between your current on-prem role to a cloud role, because it's something, there are different tasks associated with it that you have to keep in mind as you continue to develop in the cloud. But one thing that I would say is, even with being in the cloud is still a data center for all intents and purposes. It's something that you still have to think about. I'm storing my data here. What are my backup solutions? What is my redundancy to the system? What's my high availability? All of these pieces to make sure that you're continuing to adjust and check those. I've worked with customers in the past that set up backup policies that didn't meet what they needed. So making sure that that's done.
Yeah, and and I was just gonna say, we talked about the CAF, and that there's pieces in it that speak directly to the best practices. You have and you can see references in comparisons where you have a CCOE that, and you build it out, and you have expertise that needs to feed from guidelines into best practices. The best practices build further and get further down the stack. And you can almost call it kind of a well-architected framework where you go through the best practices and ask yourself the questions: hey, do we meet these guidelines for security, for reliability, for performance and monitoring, those things? Again, these are, as you're progressing, as you're going through the cloud, these are things that you need to take advantage of from your provider, from OCI, that we're really trying to make sure that you're ready and that you're stable and follow and have the best experience operating in the cloud that we can ensure that you have.
Yep, definitely. All right. So Architecture Center, great resource to continue to have.
Yes.
You can kind of see what are the next designs, what's happening in the industry that you're in. There's a lot of different pieces here. We showed in our last portion last week, actually going into the architecture, looking at some of the icons and everything for building out a different one. The other piece, and this is something that's kind of near and dear to me, is continued learning is a big piece of being in the cloud. And I know everybody's probably like, I already know this and we're good to go. But it's really something I just want to iterate on, or, kind of talk about. And that's, we have live labs. We have a platform for you to go try and build things. And I think that's another great piece to look through as you're progressing your skill set in the cloud.
Yeah, definitely. And even some of these, you can launch them from here. You can go through the labs and the workshops, and several of them, not all of them, but several of them have options where you build it directly into a sandbox outside of your tenancy. Some of them say you can build it in your tenancy. Some of them you can build it on Oracle's dime and experiment and test through the workshop and see how things work, and build it in an external sandbox. So you can experiment and you can see how things work without the risk of installing anything locally, which I know is a concern with some people. So it's this hands-on experience, this hands-on learning that follows a lot of some of the complaints I think that I've heard from customers about. There's a lot of documentation for Oracle products, but it seems like OCI is more difficult. Well, we've heard that need for that documentation. And this is the answer. This, as well as the Architecture Center, is a direct answer, like what Larry said. Let us know what your wants and needs are, and we'll respond. This is that response. We realize that there's a need for these types of solutions in the space. And as you're going through, you're already in the cloud, but you want to experiment like with this one. You want to see, start at basic services like network storage, or if you want to see how autonomous data warehouse works and play with it and see what an implementation of it looks like. You can have a guided hands-on tour of these OCI products and see how they work and experiment and get that hands-on experience in the process. So that it's not just it's not a surprise. It's not kind of go figure it out yourself. We provide that for you here.
Yep. Yeah, and there's a lot of them. So when you go to the Live Labs link and kind of look at the workshops and sprints, you can say run on Live Labs, and you have 121 labs you can run on Live Labs. And you click launch here. This one approximately, on average would take someone an hour and 30 minutes. That really comes down to what's your skill set, what's your abilities. So I'm not going to, it may take longer, it may take less time. It's entirely up to, have you done this before? Do you know what's going on? But you can, if you have a tenancy, you can run this in your own tenancy if you want. So that's one of the continued pieces of, you're in the cloud, keep up the skills, keep going through, keep looking at new things, because it's so quick and easy, as you saw from the quick start. So I'll have, Brandon and Uma kind of talk about some of the demos they did, and, some of the stuff we did. It's quick and easy to deploy and test. But it's a matter of, do you have a sandbox environment to do that at the company you're with? Is that built out? And I think that's another crucial piece of being in the cloud, is having that piece of that environment. So Brandon and Uma, what were a couple of the demos that you did, and how easy was it to kind of launch stuff?
Yeah.
I can talk a little bit about I think the demo that we did for at least networking, that one was very simple, and it was super easy because we actually used, the VCN wizard to set it up. And so that was kind of a way, I think, like one of the questions before, like having an overall OCI wizard, like we have OKit, which is similar, but we also have these specific, I guess, wizards for, specific resources and tools. And I think our VCN wizard is very helpful in terms of knowing exactly what you're creating, the CIDR blocks you're choosing, which gateways you're looking at. And then it also is able to create like those default route tables for you, as well as security lists. So I feel like in terms of being able to get started that way, and just, spin up a VCN that easily, and then also kind of be able to see it, even gives you kind of like a visual on like what the architecture would look like. Things like that, I feel like are super helpful for being able to get started like quickly and understanding that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think one of the biggest ways I learn is just build it, create it, and then destroy it, and then look at the FAQ and look at the documentation and realize, oh, okay, here's the actual process. Because it's, I look at this as like Legos. You can build your core VCN, you just keep expanding on it, and then you can destroy it really quickly if you import it to a Terraform template, or start with a Terraform template that we have, build an environment to go poke around and look at it while you're trying to learn. But we're launching new features, we're launching new capabilities relatively often. And so it's something that really will help. So it's, Jeremy, any other items that you want to kind of add to what Uma was talking about for the networking one, for some of the demos we did?
No, and you hit on it, but it also builds on that. What's next is even these labs, even in the architecture center, they're presented in a way that's easily created, easily destroyed. And that's something where, yes, when most clients we have, or customers we have, start in the cloud, by necessity almost, it is clicking around, and it's creating resources, seeing how it looks and how they interact, which is completely understandable. But that next step, that I guess productizing or maturing through your cloud journey, what that requires is that move to repeatability, scalability through automation and through infrastructure as code, which we facilitate with these workshops and the reference architectures as well. And so that's something that you kind of take from this. The workshops, the majority of the workshops, with some exceptions specifically around certain products, guide you through that, through working with either the designer or implementing something from GitHub so that it builds things out automatically, as I've often heard. And so that is what needs to happen. That needs to be mimicked in your production test, even in your development environments, so that you can, one, clean it up, be cost optimized, but also fully understand what's in your environment and fully understand how it's being built and what comprises the resources that you have in your environment. And so, yeah, like I said, building it out, using the wizards, using the frameworks. And as we spoke about last week, is as you're building out your own reference architectures, refer to frameworks that you've built yourselves, refer to stacks, pre-built stacks, and repeatable security implementations of configurations that you have internally, so that you know what's out there and you know what's being built by your teams, so that it doesn't get away from you. You don't have those shadow, what historically called shadow IT units. Now, I mean, there can be whole shadow infrastructures within your cloud environment. There's tools, there's even built-in tools within OCI to keep that from happening. And so, yeah, starting from these demos that we see here, and then building on that, using those same best practices that you start with, is the way that we suggest, and the way that we hope that you're getting, that we want you to go in your cloud journey.
Yeah. And you guys may have already touched on this since you're, on the Architecture Center page, but even just this website and like the solution playbooks that they have are like, it makes it so easy to kind of get started as well. And I think, I'm not sure if we did it for the day one and beyond sessions, but I know just in our customer enablement sessions, when we go through operations, there's so many different, deploying a hub and spoke topology, like being able to just this, like on the right-hand side where it says deploy to Oracle Cloud, it's so easy to go ahead and click and then have that create a Terraform stack for you, and then be able to use Resource Manager that way. So it's definitely using these tools in conjunction with things like OKit make it, very easy to just start learning and get hands-on very quickly that way. And also with, the live labs that you talked about.
Yeah, and it helps with the continuation too, because once you have this built out, it's what's the next steps? What am I going to implement next in our architecture? And it goes into these concepts of, well, we did a lift and shift migration. Now we need to do a iteration of that migration. What are the components we need to start slowly changing? And cloud should make this easier. If it's making it more complex, it's take a step back and say, okay, what are the questions we actually need to ask? And that's where, Architecture Center helps, best practices help, cloud adoption framework. Do we have the right people in the room? Do we have, change management procedures in place? Do we have the architectural diagrams so that we know what we're going to implement? All of those things encompass what should be happening around cloud. And a term that's thrown around a lot is kind of the DevOps model for this. Getting into CI/CD pipelines, all of those things are part of the next steps when you start getting into cloud. But these are things that are still used on-prem as you transition. And so it's making sure that you're looking at what's our strategic plan, what's our deployment path, how do we make sure that when we're in the cloud, if we need to roll back something, do we have that in place? And I know that that's some of the next steps once you deploy your architecture. If you deploy a patch, because I know everybody's seen something when it happens in our industry where you have one of those day zero events and there's a massive vulnerability. How do you get that patch out there quickly Or how do you roll back a patch that's actually impacting your environment? And this is something that the cloud should make this easier. And there are tools that we have to make part of that easier. And there's ways that you implement your architecture to make that easier. So that's kind of what I have for this talk today. Jeremy, Brandon, Uma, any last thoughts as we kind of wrap this up?
Yeah, I think the Live Labs website is very important. For me personally, I learn a lot more when I actually get hands-on, with the technology. And this is a great way to do that. Like Jeremy said, there's different levels, no matter what your experience is, and you can filter on the right-hand side so you can see the different levels there. And then also too, you can actually run this on Live Labs, so you don't have to have like an account with your credit card linked to it. You can just run it right on here for a majority of these labs.
Yep.
Exactly. And I mean, these are great resources to have, again, going into the beyond aspect of this. One thing we touched on Architecture Center as far as reference architectures and building from it. There's a lot more on there. Uma mentioned playbooks. The other thing is there's white papers on there for specific products and specific services and things of that nature. There's also build and deploy sessions. There's walkthrough sessions, similar and probably better than the ones Larry and I have put together as far as answering specific questions. We do our best, but there's people on here that do a better job at answering some of those questions. And so it's a great resource. Just again, build that bookmark folder out on your in your browser for those quick references, answers to questions. Architecture Center is really one that needs to be there. And so it's again, it grows. It's constantly being added to as we implement new services, update existing services. And so it's something where, as if you're using a managed service, a managed database of any platform, these are things that will grow. It's the cloud. That's what you're getting into. We're updating the services as well as the infrastructure, as well as the security models on your behalf. But that we've talked about it several times. Brandon and Uma talk about it in their session. That shared responsibility is we provide it. We get everything out there. It's the fun part is on your side, where you get to actually implement and deploy these things that we provide. But we do our best to make sure that you have the most up-to-date, clear information available for all of these services and changes and architectures that are out there for you to take advantage of.
Definitely. Awesome. Well, Jeremy, it's been a fun Day One and Beyond series for the advanced portion. Brandon and Uma, thank you for running the quick start. So just so everybody's aware, we will be running this series again. So it's something that feel free to reach out and say, hey, what do you want to see next? Because we're going to build a new series that's going to come out in the next few months. That's going to go into maybe more solutions architecture design and some of the other more advanced topics and some of the getting started. So we are going to be back on this channel. We're going to continue the Day One and Beyond series because I hope it's helpful to all of you. This is something that I really want to make sure that you're getting good information from it, and we're getting you the topics that you need to know to keep that beyond portion going. So thank you all, and I'm going to hand it back to Kenna for the final pieces.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeremy and Larry. Thank you, Brandon and Uma, for joining as well. I'm going to pop up a final poll because we always like to get a little feedback on our sessions. And I just saw a question come through too about getting links to the past sessions. Yes, thank you, Larry, just dropped in there. It's also in a Q&A answer as well. And that whole page is going to get updated this week to make sure that all of the past sessions are there and all the resources are listed as well. You can also go check things out on the Cloud Customer Connect forums. They all exist there as well. I'm going to go ahead and drop that link to the events link as well. So there's a couple different places you can find it, but that series page is probably the best place to go. And joining up to the forums, reaching out to us is a great way to get connected up if you're curious about more upcoming versions of this series. As Larry mentioned, we're going to do some more rounds of this and then iterate and keep making it better based on your feedback and what you're curious about and what you want to learn more about. So we're excited to have you back. And thank you everybody for joining us today in the last one of this series. And we will see you at the next one. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.